Going on there all of a sudden? According to our Todd Archer, George Pickens has not, I repeat, not yet signed the franchise tag tender for the Cowboys. Remember, on Thursday, right before the draft, Shefty reported that Pickens was expected to sign it. And all of us, I can tell you right now, sitting on the set, immediately perked up. Oh my goodness, why is he going to sign it right now? It can't be a coincidence, the timing. This is an opportunity for a trade. Probably not a first-round pick, maybe a second-round pick. Cowboys need help on defense. All of a sudden, he hasn't signed it yet. Dan Graziano, my insider extraordinaire, is this something or nothing?
It's not something yet. At this point, I think Todd is putting this out there because Todd was hearing a lot of discussion that indicated that he had signed it, and I think he just wanted to clarify that he hasn't. There's still an expectation in that building that he will. The key thing to understand about the George Pickens situation, is he going to play on the franchise tag, is the answer might still be yes. We have not heard from the player. A year ago, it was a Micah Parsons situation, and Micah, God bless him, like he lets us know everything he's thinking.
Yes.
We haven't heard anything from George Pickens, and it's one of the possible outcomes here is that he was told by the Cowboys it's franchise tag or nothing, and he goes, okay, fine, I'll show up and I'll show him. So until such time as we see him, we're free to speculate, but the expectation right now is still that he shows up and plays on the tag.
What we need is for Micah Parsons to book George Pickens on his podcast so we can get to the bottom of this. But bottom line, you're a general manager. You've lived in all of this. The draft has come and gone. So the trading of Pickens, whereas there may have been some urgency to get it done before the draft if there was something you wanted to do, now if what we're looking at is compensation in next year's draft or whatever the case may be, we're in no rush.
No, there is a sense of urgency from this standpoint. If you're a team that needs a receiver, so the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Rams, and you feel like you got to go get a receiver on a one-year deal, you want George Pickens as soon as possible to get in the offseason program. He cannot be traded until he signs the tender.
Right.
That is the most important thing here. Until he signs that franchise tag, nothing can happen. Now, I believe he will sign it because he's not going to want to miss a paycheck. There's some other minor issues that once he signs it, he can be fined for missing mandatory minicamp or training camp. But the headlines are, until he signs this tender, Greeny, nothing can happen. And if I'm a team that's considering trading for him, there is more value the sooner I get him in the building.
And the bottom line, Hawk, you're my receiver. George Pickens, we all saw what a dynamic season he had last year. Cowboys are suddenly, with all the improvements they made on defense in this draft, do you think the Cowboys should trade George Pickens?
I don't think the Cowboys should trade George Pickens. I think you work to get a deal done. If I'm George Pickens, I sign the tender because he's about halfway through this kind of, reclamation process. And for him, it's building your reputation, showing everybody you can both handle a payday and handle the load that came with Dallas Cowboys. And he did that phenomenally. One more year, he will be the highest paid receiver in football. Now, if they can get a deal done this year, if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, I absolutely think they do so. They made a lot of improvements on defense. But for me, the catalyst is if George Pickens is in this lineup or not, because that offense last year is the reason why there's so much hope in Dallas.
So to be clear, what you're saying is sign the tender, play 1 year on the franchise tag, which is still a lot of money for 1 year. Show everybody that this 1 year was not a fluke. You're not a one-hit wonder, if you will.
Right.
And then next year, you're in the Jamar Chase neighborhood.
Absolutely. I think that's the best course of action for George Pickens right now. That's really what the Cowboys have laid out for him. They feel like this is the appropriate way to handle the situation, and I think their expectation is that he will. They do not want to trade him. And, we go back to Micah. Micah forced their hand. If George Pickens wanted to have an offseason like Micah had last year and force a trade, we know the playbook, but right now we don't know for a fact that he will.
And Greedy, if I'm Dallas, I am not worried about George Pickens missing games. There's just too much. It's over $1 million a week, so I think he'll be there. Now, the risk is if he misses training camp, soft tissue injuries for the skill player is always on the table, but I don't think he'll miss games.
Okay, so that's one of the headlines in the come and go now between the free agency and the draft. So, Andrew Hawkins, are the New York Giants better or worse than they were before all of last thing?
The New York Giants are exponentially better than they were a year ago. Even if they had only brought in John Harbaugh, they would be a much better football team than a year ago. Not to mention, they flip their personality, the characteristics of their team. They bring in more firepower on that front seven, which is going to be very scary, a staple for John Harbaugh teams. Isaiah Likely in the offseason, Pat Ricard, you're looking at it here. They did great in the draft. I think this is going to be a football team that takes leaps and bounds steps forward than they were in the past season.
Yeah, I think it was a relatively, as I was asking the question, I was thinking to myself, clearly they're better. Maybe I'd like to sort of reframe it to just how much better. They lost so many close games last year. Jackson Dart should get better. We saw the almost endless list of pieces they have accumulated, and I know you're concerned about the one that got out the door.
Absolutely. The old Coach Parcells rule, which was evaluate an organization by the quality of players that leave your building. If you go back over the last few years from Julian Love, Leonard Williams, obviously Saquon Barkley, and now Dexter Lawrence, that's not nothing. Those are 4 really good players, so they are better. John Harbaugh will be really good, but that is really a big concern. Dexter Lawrence here, number 97. It is hard to find players that big and that athletic. So clearly on paper they are better, but losing Dexter Lawrence is a significant part of this analysis.
There are people, Dan, and by people, I mean at least me, who have posited that they could be next year's Patriots. Super Bowl might be too lofty, but turning it completely around from a team that was picking right up at the top of the draft to being a legitimate playoff team. I have suggested they could be that. Do you think that's overstating it?
I mean, I understand where you're coming from. Like, the second-year quarterback we're excited about, a proven head coach coming in. Yeah, but I think the one question is, of course, that run defense, the middle of that defensive line without Dexter Lawrence. Now, I think Arvell Reese is somebody who will help their run defense right away. But I think, overall, I would say better. But it's a competitive division with the Eagles having won it 2 years in a row. I think Washington and Dallas also got better. So it's hard for me to see. Last year's Patriots were in a weak AFC East and played famously one of the easiest schedules in the league.
Right.
I don't think the Giants can count on that.
Probably not. And Dallas may have, and I know this is terrible English, may have gotten more better than the Giants did, and they were already ahead of them to begin with. Now let me get to the Eagles then, because I can tell you in Pittsburgh this weekend, that's the team everybody was talking about. Mike T, are the Eagles better or worse than they were last year?
I don't think they're better because they lost a couple of blue chip players. One, Jalen Phillips, who's a great young pass rusher, and I'm assuming that they're going to lose A.J. Brown. Now look, Mekhi Lemon's going to be a great player. He was my number 1 receiver. But in 2026, to answer this question, I don't think Mekhi Lemon's going to be better than A.J. Brown. And I do think Jonathan Grenard's going to help their pass rush, but I don't think he's good as Jalen Phillips. So I think when you lose great difference-making players, they are hard to replace, especially overnight.
They're a fascinating team. Hawk, I want to ask you maybe a little more inside the weeds kind of question. But this was the topic that I heard a lot in Pittsburgh this weekend. If you look at the players that the Eagles added in this draft, they add Mekhi Lemon, who is a slot receiver, a middle-of-the-field kind of receiver, and then Stowers, the tight end from Vanderbilt, also most effective working in the middle of the field, which is legendarily not where their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, likes to work. There were people suggesting that this was a draft that did not feel like it was tailored around their quarterback. I guess I would ask you a 2-part question. Does that seem right to you? And if so, does that seem significant to you?
I think it seems significant. I don't know if it seems right. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's a glass half empty kind of approach to it. I think if you have a quarterback that struggles in a particular area, you add weapons to bolster that area. So I think Stowers over the middle and even Lemon over the middle should be an asset to Jalen Hurts. Now, the reason why I don't think it's necessarily wrong is because when you add and bolster in those portions of the field where he struggled, if he still continues to struggle, well, then it starts to give you some of your long-term answers. I think Jalen Hurts has a chance this year to take a step. Yes, it's another year of a new offensive coordinator. Yes, A.J. Brown will not be there, but at the same time, it kind of right-sizes your offense and says, okay, Devontae Smith, you are our true number 1. Lemon, you are our true number 2. Here's weapons in the middle of the field. Here's some depth at the offensive line. Let's see if we can get back to where we were in times past.
I had people saying to me that there is no greater spotlight on any player in the league going into next season than there will be on the quarterback in Philadelphia. Does that seem right to you?
I think that's fair, especially considering some of what we've heard since the season ended about potentially his role in the offensive struggles, at least from the team's perspective. Hawk makes a good point. If he doesn't like throwing over the middle of the field, adding players that make that more enticing might be the way to go. And then if he still won't do it, then maybe you have your answers. So as usual, they're installing something new around him offensively. As usual, they're asking him to work on parts of his game that need work, right? I mean, the thing with Jalen Hurts, we like a lot of things about you. Here are some things we want you to do better. Throughout most of his career, he has done that. If he doesn't do it this year, then I think it's fair to wonder sort of how much longer he'll be there.
The frustrating thing about quarterback evaluation is that people will use whatever they want to make whatever point they want to make. So when we have quarterbacks who put up gaudy stats and pass the eye test, people will say, yeah, but they never win any games. They never win any big games. Jalen Hurts, granted, sometimes the numbers don't look so good. Sometimes it doesn't pass the eye test. But my guy wins. I mean, all he ever does is win. So you can argue whichever way you want. How do you see it, Mike T?
I'm a big Jalen Hurts believer. The guy's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's won 1. He stood toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, which very few people can do. And it seems for all that accomplishment, Greeny, there's like no equity there. So to me, there's a lot of teams that would like to have Jalen Hurts' bad day for all the teams that still have question marks at quarterback. I know it's not perfect. They did add a lot of weapons. They bring in Sean Mannion. And if you look at the Green Bay Packers, one thing you could say is they distributed the ball to a lot of different receivers. Maybe that's going to be the approach this year. No A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith is clearly number 1, as Hawk said, but maybe their intention is we're going to distribute the ball a lot more than just a number 1 guy.
They even got one of the Packers receivers. So
that's exactly right. They got Dontavian Wicks. Finish it up here, Hawk. How about it? How about this conversation about Jalen Hurts, which seems to be never ending?
Yeah, I think that's the gift and the curse of Jalen Hurts. This is a quarterback who was a Super Bowl MVP a very, very short time ago. And to already be talking about whether he has a future or not in his organization has always been the Jalen Hurts experience. And so each time he's kind of answered that bell. This will be a big year for him to answer a lot of those questions. And I think their hope is that a trade of A.J. Brown equates to an addition by subtraction for their offense and identity.
I think that makes sense, yeah.
Greeny, he's only 27. He's going to be 28 in August. He should be right in the prime of his career.
He's 27 years old, and he's had more offensive coordinators than like 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks in their careers combined.
Yeah, it's just the Eagles have this incredibly high standard. They're trying to win Super Bowls. They're trying to establish legacy, and we've also seen them go away from quarterbacks in the past that they've committed to. That's how Jalen Hurts got the job in the first place. He's aware of that. I would bet on him figuring some things out this offseason.
They spent all that money on Wentz. They drafted Hurts. They made the change. We'll see if they wind up doing it again. The obvious choice, it may be in the building in Tanner McKee. People suggest that they like him, but I'm not sure that they're ready to go there yet. In the meantime, back to the NBA.